this week's session of Serving Up Knowledge. My name's Tom. I'm from the Grande Prairie District Chamber of Commerce, and the Chamber is so pleased to be working with the City of Grande Prairie on this initiative and these sessions. We are trying to engage businesses to share their skill sets with other businesses. And so far, it's been awesome. We really had some great feedback and some great information has been shared by some of our businesses. We have Chris Beauchamp here today to talk about Food Photography 101. We've got a couple of other upcoming sessions on March 11th. It'll be the top 10 HR policies you need with Casely Consulting. And on March 18th, just signed up, the pandemic is ruining everything with Argyle. It's going to be an interesting and fun session and some great ideas there. So looking forward to that one. And then we will continue the series going into the month of April. And so we were hoping that people will share their interest as far as what topics they would like to possibly see, or if they have a skill set that they would like to share with other businesses, please contact us either at the Chamber or with the City Economic Development Department. We do have Rebecca Lee here from City Economic Development, and my cohort, Cindy Simmigan from the Chamber of Commerce. So we, again, are very pleased to be working together on this session. And as far as questions go, if you're familiar with Zoom, we use the chat function, the chat box, to submit questions. And Chris will be taking breaks periodically through his session in case people have questions that they'd like to fire off to him. He loves to engage with people in attendance. And so if you just want to put your name in the chat box and indicate that you do have a question if something comes to mind right away, and we can make sure Chris is aware of that. And then after his presentation, we should have some time for a few more questions as well. So you can either chat the question or pop the question into the chat box, or we can unmute you and you can go into a little more detail. So without me having to or you having to listen to me any longer, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Beauchamp, and we are so pleased to be joined by him again. So take it away, Chris.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you to the City and the Chamber for arranging this whole series. This is the second one that I've done, and I just wanted to get a sense. I know not everybody's on camera, but who was here for my session last time? Anybody? I was. Tyler, a few. Okay, well, that's good to know. Yeah, Tom, of course. I'm actually not going to be covering a lot of the same stuff, although I'm going to give a very cursory kind of blast through some information up front, and then we're going to do some hands-on stuff in the studio here today. I've got some fancy technology going, so there's multiple points of failure. So if my image goes down or my audio disappears, somebody please let me know, and I'll be able to troubleshoot that. But I am using multiple cameras today, so I apologize if I end up putting you guys on the wrong view, or you're sitting there watching my empty room when you should be looking at me, that kind of thing. So I'm going to just screen share and one second here. Perfect. Excuse me. So I assume that everybody can see my presentation. Maybe just a little head nod to, yep, thank you. Okay, so we're talking today about food photography. Food is difficult. It's difficult to photograph. There's a lot of considerations, everything from keeping things fresh and looking their best to how to light it and how to stage it and how to make it look great. So we're going to try to cover some of those things today. In an hour to a general audience, I see Kate there. Kate likes her photo that she hasn't seen of her product, so that's cool. Yeah, so we're going to be doing some hands-on stuff today. I lost my train of thought already, but but I wanted to start by introducing myself. So my name is Chris. I'm a local photographer here in Grande Prairie. Do commercial work of all kinds. We're going to look at a couple things real quick here, but up front, before I forget, I did absolutely want to thank Kate from Great Sweets and Treats, as well as Tyler, who from meatdirect.ca, who has, they both provided some product for the demonstration today. And I've had a lot of fun doing a little bit of photography, mostly with Kate's stuff. I'm going to be photographing Tyler's stuff here moving into the future, but we are going to do a photo of a steak today. So, but yeah, I'm involved with Beauchamp Photography. That's a family-owned business we've run for about 10 years. And I also do some filmmaking under the Distillery, which is a secondary company. So I am not a food photographer. I know enough about it to share some knowledge, but and I have more experience with products, I'll say, rather than food. But I have done some food. I'm mostly a people photographer, and historically, my work has been portraiture. It's been candid environmental photos of people for companies. I've done a lot of architectural work and sort of commercial imagery of all kinds. Like I said, I've been doing commercial photography for about 10 years. So what are the things we need to think about when we're photographing food specifically? A lot of this is overlap between food and product photography in general, or still life in general, but food does have a few extra considerations. So staging and product selection is absolutely critical with food. You can have, for instance, if you go to a restaurant and order the same dish 10 times, one of those orders is going to be the one that absolutely looks the best. And in the high-end commercial world, on shoots of food, there's always a stylist, there's always a chef, there's the photographer, there's usually a team doing this, because you curate the food. You literally cook, 5 steaks and then choose the one that looks the nicest, and that's the one you're gonna photograph. So obviously, if we're a small business or a restaurant and we're doing our own photography, we're not gonna have that kind of team, but we can still apply the same curatorial selection, if you will. And that sort of push to have the higher quality is what's going to help your product or your food stand out. So, so staging and product selection, it's at the top of this list because it honestly is the most important consideration with food. And you want to spend the time to do that. You want to think about a lot of things. That gets into props and set decoration. So, what is around the plate or whatever the product is. What is that plate? What is the setting that we're implying? There's a big difference between kind of a high-end dining experience and more of maybe a food court, fast food experience. And those two types of product have basically different considerations in terms of how you might style them. So you just want to think about those kind of things. Lighting, of course, it's photography, so lighting is pretty critical. I would say it frankly comes secondary to those first 2 points, though, with food. Obviously, a photographer is going to be super picky about lighting and is going to want to make the lighting look great. But for a general, maybe amateur or a business owner who has other things that they're worried about, there's a couple of basic lighting tricks that we'll talk about when we do the hands-on stuff that will hopefully make that clearer, that you don't need to go crazy. You don't need to know everything about lighting to get a good result. Framing is another thing. So that's literally the composition of your camera. What angle are you taking it at? What camera height are you using? Those kind of things. What focal length? So what kind of lens are you using? Is it an ultra wide angle lens, or is it more of a telephoto lens zoomed in? All of those considerations make for a different feeling to the images. So you always want to be thinking about those things, but there are also some basically standard best practice tricks for that. And for those who maybe are a little bit more photography aware, I would say, use a 50mm lens or a little bit longer. You want to shoot down at the food level, or kind of at a 45 above it, or straight down on it. Those are kind of the 3 most common angles you'd want to consider. But we'll look at that when we get into the hands-on. But those are the quick ones. It's photography, so you're going to get a little bit more mileage out of your end result if you are doing some image editing. So photographers use all kinds of software for that. There are all kinds of free apps if you're doing this on your phone. But you do probably want to put those images through an edit before you call them complete. And all of these things add up to the overall mood of your image. And that's what we're getting at. Some coffee. Thank you. Yeah. My wife was kind enough to make some coffee, which we're going to use shortly. Although I should just drink some because it's still necessary. Okay, so I wanted to share this image. I see a big smile again from Kate from Great Sweets and Treats, who made these incredible Dr. Seuss cookies. She dropped this off. She was so kind to make one, like make this whole set for us. But James is our 2-year-old son, so that was really special. So I wanted to share this image specifically to talk about product styling and staging, because the name of the game is patience. It's really easy to want to just put it down, take a picture, move on with your life. But the time you spend staging and setting things up is the difference between a good shot and a great shot, or a bad shot and a good shot. So I wanted to show this result and the behind the scenes. Cookies don't stand up on their own, especially, all these different shapes of these incredible, unique cookies. So what I did was I took some toothpicks and some little pieces of tape, and I put a little stand behind each cookie and very slowly and carefully added them to the scene. I had several times where they kind of did the domino effect and I had to start over. That's part of what this is. So when you're working with food, you spend the time. It's extra stressful if you're working with hot food or fresh food, because the time you're spending setting things up or staging, that food is getting cold. Maybe it's wilting, that kind of thing. So that's again where at a certain level, you're working with assistants. Again, if you're not at that level, if you're doing your own photography for your restaurant or your business, find a helper. My wife Laura helped me with shooting some of this stuff this past week. It makes all the difference to have somebody there who can maybe prep the food while you're setting up for the photos or that kind of thing. So I would encourage that. So why does all of this matter? Well, a photo is worth 1,000 words. It's a cliche for a reason. We get an instant impression from the photos we see, and it makes for an instant impression of the company that those photos represent. So putting a little bit of work into this stuff for your business is going to hopefully elevate those first impressions that you get with potential new clients. Photography has a huge impact on buying decisions. And in food specifically, we've all gone to restaurants and looked at menus and ordered based on a picture. We see the menu board and we think that looks good and we make a buying decision. So it's really important. Obviously, restaurants are suffering because of COVID-19 and the year we've all had. My heart goes out to these businesses. But in a way that's more important than ever, online sales, pickup, delivery, these things they've never been more important. And the same principles apply. If you're scrolling through I won't make any comments about my thoughts on the delivery apps that are out there that restaurants are using, although there's a new local option that I encourage people to check out. But if you're browsing through your delivery app, looking for something to eat, same thing applies there. As if you're opening a menu, you're going to order based on what looks good. The difference there is that you're looking at a whole bunch of restaurants at once. So restaurants are competing with each other in a platform like that in a way that, yes, those apps have been around for a while, but that is somewhat of a new reality where the photos you have for your product are literally side by side with your competitors, and your customers are kind of seeing it all and making decisions. So you do want to think about this stuff. That's probably enough on that. Brand storytelling. So this gets at the impression part, but basically it's important that you're thinking about your images in terms of setting the overall tone for your brand. And, again, there's a big difference between a dark and moody hot plate image here and a bright and colorful, cookie image. And so you wouldn't want to style one the way that you would style the other one. The other thing with storytelling, this is true across all photography, but you kind of want to think about the story. So, and it's very subtle. Some images have a lot of story, some have less. I think looking at this image of the steaming food, this was actually a wedding that we did. This was a Chef Gavin creation, so it helps when you have a really fantastic chef who's made something that you're photographing. But the dark background is part of that story. It sets a tone of that kind of candlelit dinner or that kind of thing. Oops. There we go. Just see. Sorry, guys, my camera just shut off there. Yeah, the steam is part of that story. The plate and dressing, the styling of the food, all of that is telling a story of kind of a high-end dining experience. So I really quickly wanted to just talk about platforms, and this is more about trying to conceive, you can take the same product and photograph it different ways for different reasons. So, we all nowadays are consuming images on social media. I would say that kind of goes along with website use, and social media can be similar. There's lifestyle products versus staged products or catalog or menu shots where it's just the product, versus a lifestyle image. There's a bit more of that story and you'd see it in a context that is realistic. Restaurants and food, it's about menus and menu boards. I think menu images, you can bring lifestyle images into menu images, but you also see a lot of times, if you imagine Tim Hortons, for instance, it's just the breakfast sandwich and a coffee. And it's good photography, but it's very kind of, here's just what the product is. So that's another kind of approach. And then advertising campaign images, which can be super creative or high concept, that kind of thing. Advertising images tend to have a lot more negative space because there's often a message to go into that space. So you want to keep things kind of simple if you're shooting for advertising. But an image like this could work as an ad, it could work as a menu item, that kind of thing. I've got a lot of images for Kate here. I appreciate your smile, Kate, because yeah, you never know how things are received. So I get to see in live real time what you think of these images of your amazing Costa Rican creations. So again, a menu image tends to be a little bit more, here's what the thing is. And photographically, that might mean a longer lens tends to kind of flatten things out. Nice even lighting that's going to really bring the textures to life, but really just presenting kind of what you're going to get if you buy this thing, versus again, something that's maybe a little bit more high concept, or something that's a little bit more lifestyle and social media. And that could be something that's a little bit more artsy. You might want to stage things in more of a creative way. I took the same products from the box, changed the background out, and just kind of laid them out in a geometric pattern. An image like this, I think, would probably do pretty well on Instagram, for instance, but also could be used for, advertising or that kind of thing. I did want to talk very briefly about mimicry. So there's no shame in photography. All photographers are inspired by others. If you're not sure how to photograph your product, go and look at what is out there in the world and see what you like and what you don't like, and mimic it, borrow it, steal it. Kate actually shot the shot on the right here, which I thought was really great. And I thought it was an interesting exercise for me to just recreate it. Obviously a little bit different. I don't think mine is particularly any better than hers was. I might have fancier gear, slightly different take on the same setup. I don't know what you are using there, Kate. I'd actually love to hear, maybe a bit later in the session, we can talk about it. Your phone, yeah, good. I was kind of hoping that was your phone, but honestly, your result was so good that I couldn't be sure. And actually, Kate, since you're answering, what kind of lighting did you use here? Is this a window light, or do you have some kind of photographic lighting tool?
No, just my window.
Window, I thought so.
I literally have, it's like a poster board from the dollar store that I got, and and that's kind of what I use for like lighting. And then I just have like this tray, and I put the cookies there, and then I move everything so carefully right next to the window. And then usually around from 11 to 1 is the best time for me to take pictures. because that's when the light is like not direct, but somewhat. So yeah.
I
You
love it.
should see me staging my cookies though. It's terrible.
Thank you for sharing. I love hearing everything you just said. It actually aligns very closely with what we talked about in the last session, which is if you don't have fancy gear, soft window light is the solution. It'll make almost anything look great. I used photo lights in mine. I used a textured tile underneath instead of a white card. But you know, a similar result. And my gear and setup probably cost me $10,000. Kate's cost her her phone and the dollar store and her time and creativity. And her result again is no worse than mine. So you don't need the fancy gear. You don't need, you know, I need the fancy gear, but but you generally don't. You can get a good result with what you have and a little bit of ingenuity. Yeah. So that's the end of my presentation, which I'm really happy about because I want to get into working here behind me. So I'm going to just turn off my screen share. It's probably a really good time if people have questions. You're welcome to post in the chat or, sorry, does anybody have any questions?
No questions coming in so far.
Okay.
Lots of comments about Kate's amazing cookies. A couple of comments just saying thanks for sharing the behind the scenes. People really liked the toothpicks and how you were talking about the frustrations of everything falling over. So we appreciated that. We've got one here from Marley. How do you make shiny food and powdery foods look good without being either too shiny or too powdery?
It's really hard. And sometimes you can't. Sometimes, again, a professional would composite two photos together. If you've got something in the scene that's really shiny and other things that are really matte, you can really struggle to light for both types of material. It can be done. It's almost better, I think. Hopefully we'll get a little bit of a scenario here where we can maybe see some of that. So it's fair to say you guys can see my camera view now, right? Okay, great. So I have this set up here. The other thing that's different than last time I really kind of set up one lighting setup and we just kind of used it. Today I've got all my flashes set up the way I would normally work. So we're gonna give that a shot and see how it goes. But it is probably a little bit more technical than other folks might be. We'll see how it goes. Okay, so I have this set up right here. I haven't really spent any time other than, is that gonna work? There we go. Okay, so I haven't really spent any time setting this up. We set these objects out last night and I put the food in this morning. I kind of need to see this screen. I don't know if I can. I might just have to change my own view. Just 1 second here. Okay, that's better. The way that my cameras are all set up, I need to see the zoom window in order to see what I just photographed. So, so that doesn't look half bad. There's a few things going on here. What we wanted to do was set up a colorful scene. Is this going to work? Oh, I don't need to do that. Is to set up a colorful scene. This is Kate's Costa Rican sweets and treats. Is that fair to say, Kate? That's what this particular product is it's from where Kate is from. And, you know, we wanted to go for a very tropical kind of vibe. I'm just going to remember to change my camera view so you guys can see what I'm doing. I just moved the camera a little bit. I'm just going to reframe on this a little bit tighter. It tends to be good advice to get in a little closer and fill the frame. That's sort of photo 101. If you're not close enough, or if your photos aren't interesting enough, you're not close enough, is what they say. It's tough for me to keep switching the right camera views. Okay, I'm going to shoot another shot here. And we'll see what that looks like. So between those two shots, which I should be able to do, you can see I just made a slight adjustment. I got in a little bit closer. Whoops. I also went up a little bit higher by getting in closer. And that helps, you know, see all of the cookies instead of just the front row. And I would probably go further. And I'm going to do one more image. Thank you. Oh boy. So yeah, one of the things I wanted to just kind of talk about here is the difference in the mood and feeling when we change our camera settings. So this shot, I don't mind what's going on. I like all of the color. Staging wise, you know, there's always more we could do. Find perfect bananas, you know, et cetera, et cetera. You can tinker all day. But for our purposes, I'm okay with this. What I don't like is how fake it feels. It feels like a studio setup with some products. You know, if that background was not a gray piece of paper, but was actually a beautiful ocean view, you know, maybe I'd start to buy into this. But one thing that we can do is actually just change our depth of field. So I'm going to open the camera lens up. I'm actually shooting right now at f16. I'm going to open the camera lens up to an f4. So a lot more light, 4 stops difference. I'm going to let in a lot more light, but I'm also going to get a lot less depth of field. So I'm going to change my camera settings. And I should maybe switch to this view. So I'm going to change my camera settings here to f4. And I'm using studio flashes, so I also then need to compensate my lighting by turning all my flashes down 4 full stops to get the same exposure, but now at a different aperture. If that's all Greek to you, I'd say don't worry about it. But for those who maybe do understand what I'm talking about, I wanted to give that context. Okay, so shoot that shot. There we go. So now if I just go back and forth between the two, you can see by throwing the background out of focus, we're just getting a little bit more believable, I think. You know, the focus is a bit more on the food. It's a bit less on the scene. Sometimes you want that really deep depth of field and everything is sharp. Other times you just really want to focus on the product. So I'm going to make one more tweak just with my own focus. F4 is a lot more narrow depth of field. So it's more important than ever to get essentially critical sharp focus. And we're not going to be able to get all of those food items in focus together because it's just too narrow. So I'm going to make sure that the front row is sharp, which it is enough for now. So what I wanted to do was to kind of show how the same product can look in a scene like this, where it's very bright and colorful. And now we're going to dramatically change the scene with another version of the same baked goods and do something else entirely. So this will take me a second. Also, a really great time if people have questions or want to even come on the mic. Maybe Rebecca can facilitate that while I change out this stuff.
For sure. Well, I had a question while you were chatting about that, or maybe just a comment, I guess, around recognizing that I think that a bunch of us, like Kate, and I see comments from Helen at Tourism, we're working on our iPhones, many of us. So I think it's the portrait mode, if what I've learned off of Instagram is right. Do you have any comments on getting that same type of effect, but using your iPhone?
Right. I think somebody asked a question about this last time and I misunderstood them. When you say the portrait mode, what you're talking about is the portrait setting that throws the background into a blur. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the other things that portrait mode, I think on cell phones, my phone doesn't have that. I'm old school. But one of the things that it does is it uses, I think, a longer lens. So it'll tend to be a telephoto lens instead of a wide angle lens. I can actually simulate that right now, if you don't mind zooming in on me. And just that longer focal length alone is responsible for narrowing the depth of field. A lot of modern cell phones also have, it's tough to focus. They also have a algorithmic trick to make the background blurry. Generally, that's not a bad way to go. A longer focal length is often a way to make things look better. I think there's an inclination when we're new to photography to use our wide angle on things, or to just put the phone up close and shoot a shot. If you have a portrait mode or a longer lens on your phone or your camera, use it. And, you know, again, I'll switch over here. I don't have anything on the table right now, but this is a 85 millimeter lens. So that is absolutely within the sort of ballpark of a portrait mode on a cell phone. It's definitely more telephoto than a wide angle. And you see it compresses the background. It adds depth because of the focal length itself. So yeah, portrait mode is a really good way to go depending on what you're doing. It's not to say that there isn't and can't be a place for more of a wide angle look or using a non-portrait mode, but yeah, portrait mode is good.
Couple comments from Kate here. She seems to be your backup today, so thanks to Kate.
Yeah, thanks, Kate.
She said portrait mode for some reason doesn't work on food for me, though only on people's faces. However, I use an app that makes that happen for me. Kate, I don't know if you're able to maybe pop the name of that app into that chat. It might probably be useful for other people as well. And then I did also have a comment from Helen with tourism. She said, at tourism, we like to go out to restaurants and post images of people out eating, having fun. Do you have any tips for that type of photography? Again, usually using a phone. So more of that spontaneous food photography, I guess.
But people, just to be clear, it's Helen, right?
Yeah.
Do you mean it's a focus on people in the restaurant, or is it still a focus on the food?
Give her a chance to answer here. In the meantime, Kate did pop the name of that app into the chat for everybody. It's called Be Funky, and the setting is called Tilt Shift. Thanks, Kate.
Yeah. Oh, I remember what I did differently. This will just take me a second. Okay, so I just need to adjust this. I'm just trying to keep you guys aware of what I'm doing. I'm just going to lower my table because I can. And aha.
So Helen says it's sometimes with people or when the food comes to the table before we start eating, more like a teaser.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're shooting a food shot with a phone at the table while you're about to eat, you're pretty limited in what you can do. You're going to be kind of subject to the lighting that's there. It doesn't mean you can't still position yourself for the food to kind of look for a good angle, but at that point, I would say my tip is really just about camera angles. So I mentioned it before, and we're going to hopefully get a sense of that right now. I'm going to have to go faster. We're not going to get to the steak. Okay. But you want to be in one of three spots. And I'm going to switch over to this camera. I'm going to show you what those are really fast. This will be a little bit shaky. I apologize for that. So warning, but the angle we're at now, some version of this, I'll just hold it here. I'd call this like an oblique angle, maybe like a 45-degree. I'm kind of off axis from the food this way to the right and left, but also up and down. And you can, there's a range here where you can get away with a nice composition, but that's kind of a safe place to shoot food. Another version is down, difficult for me to see, is down at the food level. This would be sort of option number 2. If you've got a deep background, this can work really nicely. Yeah, it's just another way. If you had steamy food like that sample image, you would see the steam in an angle like this. where you might not see it in other angles. And then the third and final one, the lens I have is not going to be ideal for this, but it's the top down. We've all seen that on Instagram. You get the idea. So those three angles, if you take nothing else away from today, just kind of committing to those common best practices is going to probably elevate your food photography. I would say that the first two of those angles, you should probably use a longer lens. The third one, you might want to consider maybe a wider lens to be top down. Okay. I hope that's a little bit helpful. And now I'm, like I said, I'm working quickly here, but I'm going to place these in here. And I'm going to, I don't know if it's warm anymore, but I'm going to fill this coffee. Yeah, so it's a good exercise or a good example. You guys might not be able to see it in that view. You'll see it in a second, but the coffee already doesn't look that fresh. It's not all full of thick crema like it was. It's not steaming anymore. So that would have been a really nice touch, but we'll shoot a shot. Oh, I need to change modes. My lighting is also set up still for the previous shot, so I'm going to have issues. Yeah. I'm going to stop way down. Try again. Too far. Okay. Well, for our demonstration purposes, it'll do. My point really was that you can take the same product, the same cookies in this case, change the styling, and get a very different feeling. Is one or the other better? I would say not necessarily. I probably want to play with my lighting more if I had unlimited time. Maybe I'll just take a second to do. Okay, too much. So you can see the tinkering involved. To get in the right ballpark. Shoot one more. Must just be the screen share. That looks really kind of gray to me. But you get the idea. So I'm going to just take a quick second and just talk about the lighting going on here. And then we'll take another quick look at that image. So there's actually three lights happening on this image. The first is, well, and this is probably, I should turn this one off. So there's a light back here. I don't know if you can see it, not so much from that angle, or yeah, you can. It is, where is it? Right there in the back corner. So that is a bare bulb with a little circle reflector on it. So that's a hard light coming back towards the table. There's a softbox here that's also going through a piece of diffusion for extra soft light. And then there's the strip box hanging from the ceiling up there with a grid on it. That black grid is keeping the light from spilling all over. This was really set up for the last scene, and I think it's that hard light back there that I should just turn way down / off. I'm going to take a second and do that. But what these three lights are kind of doing for me is a little simulation of daylight. Just gonna turn that one down, and we'll do another shot. Okay, that's better already. So that hard light from the back corner was really kind of blasting everything. It's a choice, but you can see how different the image is. And there's actually also now a light on the floor that's kicking in, so that's hitting the background. But you had talked about shiny things versus more matte textured things. That question was brought up. This scene, the cup is kind of shiny, so you can see that it is picking up reflections of the world around it. That's what shiny things do. So when you're lighting for something shiny, you kind of want to light to the reflection. You know, bring in a white card. I did this last time to show you what that might look like, just to give a sense of the principles. You know, if you brought in a white card right here and shot the same shot again, chances are that we would now see a really strong, you can see it in the cup there. You see the reflection on the side of the cup. And frankly, reflectors like this are often a good choice. You can do a lot with that, even with if you're modifying daylight. Just bring something in to bounce onto something shiny and you'll add a lot of shape and dimension to it. With everything else and the general principle, and this applies if you're Instagramming your food at a restaurant, the general principle is to light food from the side or from the back, or both. So the lights, again, we saw the lighting setup. All the light is coming from the left and the back. And what that is doing is it's throwing the shadows forward towards the camera. And whenever you do that, what you do is add three-dimensional shape to objects. If you have the lighting where your camera is blasting straight at the food, all those shadows disappear because the light is hitting them from the front, and you don't get three-dimensional shape anymore. You get a very flat image. So yeah, that's probably enough on this scene. Are there questions about this?
Well, yes, we've got one question here from Kate. Oops, and I asked her about her cookies, so she just gave us a response here. But do you have a preference in the background for certain foods? For example, is a darker background better or worse for one food versus another?
Yeah, it's hard to generalize. I'd say it really depends what you're trying to do. What's the mood? Who's the audience? You know, I think like with Kate's Baked Goods, again, there's a children's audience with some of her products, and there's, I think, a more maybe adult audience with some of her other baked goods. And I think you could have images in those two veins. And so the cookie images we looked at earlier are maybe a better example than the fruit. But even the fruit one is a bright and airy image. The thing we've got kind of in the works right now is more of a, I don't know, artsy coffee house kind of feeling. I'm going to do one more thing because we can real fast, and then we're going to switch to the final food.
I had another thought while you were explaining the light from the left, or having the light from the side or the back. Going back to Helen's question about taking pictures of food in restaurants.
Yes.
I think probably an easy tip would be just to try and ensure that you're taking your pictures right next to the windows and scheduling between that 11 and 1 time frame, like Kate mentioned. Hey.
Yeah, so you can think about those kind of things. Sit by the windows on the north side or the shady side of the building. That would be good advice. Sometimes direct sun photographs really nicely, but it's a little bit harder to control. So you could also, depending on the look you want, you might put the food right in the sunbeam and then find a good angle. But it's mostly about moving the food and yourself in relation to the lighting. And put it down, move around it, find where it looks best. Usually that will involve some shadows coming towards you, or off to the side a little bit. But yeah, that's kind of the cheater's tip if you just want to find something a little bit more interesting, is to do that.
That's great.
I wasn't sure how this would turn out. I couldn't see what I was doing, but I just wanted to shoot a quick top down. Obviously, our tile is not big enough to do this. We'd have to crop really heavily on this image to get in so you're not seeing the set. But that said, I think there's still, a really nice top-down image with the icing sugar the coffee beans. It's all very kind of subtle, but it implies, you know, a nice treat and a coffee. So that'll have to do for that one. We're down to 10 minutes. So I'm going to bring in our final scene. I'm going to drink this coffee. And so bear with me 1 second while I get the final tile. Just a note on these two. These are just tiles that I picked up from Tile Ideal locally. And I think it cost me about $60 to get a selection of tiles that I can photograph different things on. So not a big expense. If you're doing your own products regularly, I know, for instance, Tyler is, who donated our meat today to the photograph. You know, do something like that. Find a couple of things, you know, a little bit of upfront expense, and you'll have something that you can work with consistently and get a nice result. Tiles are really nice because you can see what I'm doing. I'm just swapping the whole scene in and out. That's handy if you're doing a bunch of stuff in one day, or if you're working with an assistant who can prep the food on a tile and then drop it in. But they're also really nice because there's texture there, and you can get a lot of story out of the color and the texture that you choose. So I'm going to grab the last thing. I can't really take any credit for this one. This was all Laura. I like what she did. So maybe just switch views. Great. And I need to change lenses, so forgive the blurriness that's about to happen on your screen. Oh, I guess it shuts off. One other thing to talk about with set dressing, I think that first scene, I was hoping to get into that, but of course, time is always a premium in these things. You can overdo it. You can absolutely upstage your product with too much junk in the scene. You're going to just want to kind of be aware of that. Less is often more. I'm just finding a frame where I'm not seeing the edge of my tiles. And I'm just going to pre-focus. I guess we'll kind of put the meat in there somewhere, which I can do right now. Probably owe Tyler an apology that this is not a fresh, steaming, perfect looking steak. Ideally, this would be hot off the grill, or you'd be working with a food stylist who knows what they're doing and can make a steak that is preserved. There's all kinds of tricks in food styling that we do not have time for today. But basically, most of the food you see photographed for big brands, you're not even really seeing the food. You're seeing something that's heavily processed and manipulated so that they can sit there and photograph it all day without it going bad or looking wilty. So I'm going to shoot this with the existing lighting, and we'll see what we get. All right, so that is a very dark image. I would do all kinds of fine tuning to the lighting. I'm going to do a really quick version of that right now, just to kind of get things maybe a little bit more in the ballpark that I'd like. Yeah, that's okay. And this really was designed as a top-down image, which I will have to probably shoot after our time here. But yeah, so you know what? I take that back. We've got a few minutes. I'm going to put this other lens on, and we'll see if we can get a top-down image. Are there more questions while I'm tinkering here? Does anybody feel like they asked a question and didn't get a satisfying answer? I can take another crack.
Nothing coming in so far.
Okay, good. Now you won't be able to see unless it's doing the picture-in-picture thing. I'm just going to switch back to this view and try to see what we're getting. So one thing I can see immediately in that is that my strip box that's up above and behind the food is absolutely creating a glare in my tile. I don't think that's bad necessarily, although it's a bit bright for my tastes. If I was shooting this scene sort of all day long or going for the perfect shot, I would rig my camera up above here. One thing I haven't talked about is working on a tripod. If you have one and you're working with a real camera, or even you get one for your phone, I'd encourage you to do it. I think you get a different way of working by using a tripod. Forces you to kind of slow down and really fine tune yourself. You can get cell phone tripods that are, $40 and can do a lot. Okay, I'm going to shoot one more. No, you guys can't see anything. I just turned the light down that I'm talking about that's up above. We'll try one more and see. There we go. Much better. So that glare was just making everything too bright. Just try that scene. I'll shoot a couple more. Because I'm just hand holding this camera up in the air, you're not 100% sure what you're getting. And I want to make sure that I have a couple images that I can edit. So again, with the scene we have, I would need to clean up. I should spend a minute and wipe the board down, so that gets at our styling, the importance of styling. You can see those little smears. It's still kind of dark, so I'd probably brighten that up via lighting or in post. And then I would have to square crop this because our scene is, doesn't go on forever. And frankly, I would fine tune the lighting a lot on this. That the vegetables and they're not popping, they're not bright. I think leafy greens and red tomatoes should be very bright. So this will be something that I continue to refine, but you can kind of get the idea. We're at time. I don't mind hanging around longer if people want, but yeah. Anybody have any other comments or questions?
Thanks so much, Chris. Yeah, we want to be respectful of time here, but if people are willing to hang around, Chris is willing to chat some more and answer any more questions. And I know everybody's probably thinking, okay, now what am I going to have for lunch? Because this has been just incredible, and more importantly about what having for dessert, I think. So after seeing Kate's creations, but yeah, I appreciate everyone doing this. It's there's so many things to think about when taking, and you want to show off the product, you want to make sure it looks its best, and we've certainly seen that today. So thanks to everyone for being involved with this. Any more questions? We, in Chamber World, we like to do a going once, going twice, going 3 times. Oh, Kate has one trick that she can show.
Awesome.
All right, let's see your trick, Kate. Oh, says hang on.
I don't know how to use Zoom, so clearly the kitchen is my thing. No, I just want to show you guys because I don't know. I'm no expert, but I don't know. I've been kind of learning through the internet, and I don't know. But I bought this at the dollar store, and it's just what's it called?
Cutting board. Cutting board.
Yes, a cutting board. Yeah, but it's a wooden cutting board. So I just kind of stage my things. So like usually it's brand new, right? So obviously I'm using my treats on this, but I put my treats on the cutting board, and then this cutting board, I put it on top of some sort of background, whatever that is. So I also have this, which it's just a drawing, like a rack for cookies. But when I stage this and that, and then I put whatever treats on top, then it kind of creates like a background, like one of Chris's beautiful backgrounds. And then I have this, which is like my magic wand is just also a tray from the dollar store. But I put usually my treats, like if I want to take like a close-up shot of the food, then I just put it on here and then I take the picture. But because the background is white, then I can edit it and then it will look like it's professional, but it's actually just on this thing. Kind of.
Kate, when you say you can edit it, is there a certain program you use to edit?
That's what I wanted to show you guys. Let me see if I can find something quick that you can, like this over here. I just don't know if you guys can see. Like those are they're some coconut type of parts. And so if you see, there's in the background, there's the cutting board and then the cookie tray on top and then the treats are on top. But so I just have an iPhone, right? And so when I have, can you all see?
Yep.
Okay. So I go to edit, and then the one thing that I would suggest to start is the light. So if you go to edit and you go to this second little one right here, it says exposure. So the picture was actually that dark because I took it at night. And so usually I don't take pictures at night, but I did because I had no other choice, right? But then if I just go to exposure, the light goes up. And so it looks like it's kind of the day, but you have to be careful because if you go too much, then it's too much, right? So then you kind of have to play with that exposure. Like your iPhone has, if you have a more like a newer iPhone, it has good editing for if you don't have a good camera like Chris's, because I don't have one. But that trick is good.
Yeah, no, it is a good trick. And you can use a lot of things for that. So we all have phones. Your native phone app is going to have some editing controls. Kate mentioned exposure. Definitely think about exposure. Think about white balance. So that gets technical quickly, but basically light comes in all kinds of different colors and you want to pick a white balance that is true to the light in your scene. And you want to avoid mixed lighting. So even in my basement right here, the camera I'm using is very bad for this, but I have a slightly warm light on me. The background is bluish lights in the ceiling. There's another light in the stairs. They're all slightly different colors and you can see that. So for photography reasons, you want all your light to be the same color, or you want to mix colors with intentionality. And if you don't know how to do that, don't do that. Just pick one color. That's why a window is daylight. If your camera set to shade mode or daylight mode, it's one color of light that's affecting you, but you still probably want to tweak that white balance setting in your post-production so that you might want to warm it up a little bit, or if the color seems a bit too warm, you pull it towards the blue. White balance exposure. If you get a little bit more advanced than that, what I'd encourage people to do is look at individual controls for highlights and shadows. There's usually one for the middle as well, but really if you're adjusting your highlights and shadows, you can get a long way. So again, looking at the scene of me right now, like that stairway is super blown out and too bright. Like you'd want to fix that in camera by turning that light down or whatever. But if you're in post and you have something like that in your shot, if you haven't blown it out to pure white, which this is, you can still adjust those highlights down or up to give it a different feeling. And then same with shadows. So you can see the deep blacks in my softbox thing back here. If you needed detail there, you would want to lift the shadows up and you'd start to see a bit more detail in the darkest parts of the image. So those are kind of if you're only doing a few things, exposure, white balance, and then maybe shadows and highlights or contrast curve. It's kind of the same principle. But those are the things you'd want to address for sure. And you can find tutorials galore on basic editing. The other app that I can recommend if you don't have something good on your phone, there's an app called Snapseed that is, it's really good. You do it all with your thumb up and down, right and left, and you can change all those things with a few quick flicks of your thumb. So
Krista actually mentioned Snapseed in the chat box, so obviously
perfect.
she said she's been playing with it and highly recommends it. Ken said that tip from you last time, if you have the newer iPhones, you can lower the exposure before taking the photo so it's a little dark, and then brighten up the photos later so they don't get washed out. So people are paying attention to you, Chris.
That's good. That is a good tip. Phones want to overexpose. They want to lift the shadows typically, and what they often do is blow the highlights, which again is happening here. So you often at the time of capture, you want to pull your exposure down just to where those highlights are no longer clipping to pure white. And that ensures that you've got image detail in your whites, which is the most common mistake, I guess, in photography, is to blow out your highlights because you can never recover them again. They're gone. It's pure white. So that's a good tip. The other thing is bringing the exposure down has huge impacts on the contrast and saturation of your image. So the more underexposed you are, typically the more rich the colors seem and the more contrasty the image tends to look. That can be a tool to use. So you want to pull that exposure down a little bit and really punch up the color. So
excellent. Just a reminder that all our sessions are going to be on are on the city's YouTube channel. This one will be shortly after we're done recording here. But Rebecca's going to put that link in the chat box here as I stall for time. And but we also share it on social media, both the city and the chamber, and so we encourage you to share those links and go back and watch the sessions. And there's the YouTube link. Thanks, Rebecca. And again, thanks to the city and thanks on behalf of the chamber. Thanks to Chris and Kate do Food Photography 101. Their YouTube channel will be coming out shortly, I'm sure. And thanks to everyone for supporting this event and sharing the information on your social media, and let's keep trying to make everyone better, and we work well together, and we get better together. So on behalf of the city and the chamber and Chris and Kate and everyone else on here, you guys have a great day and a great weekend, and we will talk to you soon.
Thanks a lot, Tom. Thanks, everyone.